Hello, Bay Ridge. Welcome to another edition of After Hours. This week, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the freedom of limits. On Sunday, we were looking at the topic of freedom and how often it is really misunderstood in our culture. As it's quoted in The Princess Bride, you keep using that word, but I don't think it means what you think it means. And one of the key aspects that I was trying to point out is in our culture, we think freedom means that there are no limits to our will, our choices. But in fact, limits are actually not against our freedom, but are the key to real freedom. I taught an entire series on this. You can look it up on our website. It's called The Freedom of Limits. There were like 7 teachings, I think, where I looked at various aspects of this. And it's important for us to understand this because it is so built into our culture and our way of thinking that even many Christians buy into it. We may recognize that it's not true in one area, but overall we tend to think in this way that what we're really grasping for is the freedom from any kind of limits or constraints. And this has been in our culture and growing for centuries. William Blake, in a poem called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, had a couple of lines in it that expressed this idea. He said, "He who desires but does not act breeds pestilence." That if you have a desire and you don't act on it, you're actually spreading like disease throughout yourself and to those around you. And then he later on said, "Sooner murder an infant in its cradle than nurse unacted desires." That it would be less wicked to kill a baby in its cradle than to have desires that are there and you're not acting upon them. What we want, we should go after. We should not accept limits. And maybe you're not one who reads a lot of poetry or thinks in that way and says, well, how does that really affect us? That's some poem from long ago. But this grew throughout our culture until in one of its most famous expressions, the Supreme Court of the United States, Justice Anthony Kennedy, in the famous case known as Planned Parenthood versus Casey, stated this, that at the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life. So notice what Justice Kennedy is saying there, that if you're going to be free, you have to define what existence means, what meaning means, what the universe means, what human life is all about. There can be nothing from outside that would define that for you. You sovereignly must make that determination on your own. And we see this. He was writing about it in reference to making decisions on abortion, but we see it throughout the sexual revolution, the LGBTQ plus revolution, which is really just picking up on the sexual revolution of the 60s, but continuing to expand it. We see it there are even people today who say there are no limits. They refer to themselves as furries. I have a son who had to lifeguard at a party where there were people who proclaim that they are actually dogs and they try to dress like dogs and swim like dogs. And this is not play acting. This is not a costume party. They claim to identify as a dog or a cat or some other animal. They don't accept that they are human. There are others, the transhumanists, including, I've mentioned a number of times, Ray Kurzweil, who's the chief engineer for Google. So this is somebody of great power in our culture. They don't accept the limits of even death. They are trying to extend beyond what it means to be human, to become X-Men, if you will. This is here in our culture. We also see it even in workaholism, that I'm going to work and define my identity by that, and in the breakdown of community, because of course, if it's up to me to define what reality is, when you define it differently than me, we're going to come into conflict. There's going to be problems. So it inevitably is leading to a breakdown in our community. And so it's important for us to understand this is all growing out of this false idea that freedom means there are no limits to my will. But actually, in that series that I talked about, I looked at a whole bunch of different ways we have to understand that freedom actually comes from embracing the limits of, for example, body and soul, that we really are a body and a soul. There are those who deny the immaterial part of humanity. But today we've got people who are saying, my body doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that every cell in my body tells me that I'm a male. I don't feel like a male, and therefore I am no longer a male. We see it with work and rest. Again, there are people who are workaholics, and our culture does not want to accept any period of shutting down. We must go 24/7, but that goes against the way we were made. Of feasting and fasting, our culture does not want to fast. It wants to simply feast and move on. Of marriage and sex, we want to completely break those two apart from one another. Of any sense of obeying God's commands, that nothing outside my will can tell me what to do. My will is sovereign. In all of those areas I looked at, that they're right there in Genesis 1 and 2 and into chapter 3 to define what it means for us. And it's so important for us to understand this, because limits are the key to freedom. There's a freedom that comes with limits, and this is for two huge reasons that cannot be escaped. It doesn't matter how much I proclaim freedom as something else, I can't get away from these two things. The first one of them is the whole created order limits us. There is a reality that is outside of us, and it is the entire cosmos, if you will. Everything that exists outside of us. G.K. Chesterton, in his masterful work, Orthodoxy, put it this way: if you draw a giraffe, you must draw him with a long neck. If, in your bold, creative way, you hold yourself free to draw a giraffe with a short neck, you will really find that you are not free to draw a giraffe. The moment you step into a world of facts, you step into a world of limits. See, there's realities out there, and Chesterton was writing this over 100 years ago, and he was already seeing what was coming down, what Blake had said, and all these things that were moving through our culture. But Chesterton was pointing out, well, you can make these claims, but when you step out into the real world, it limits you in all kinds of ways. There are physical limits, relational limits, experiential limits. There are moral limitations that are imposed by the created order upon us. I can declare I don't believe in the law of gravity, but it's going to operate nonetheless. I can declare that I'm the center of the universe and what I want in my sense of reality is that, but that's going to break down relationships. They do not work that way. No matter what I'm claiming, my experience is going to be related to reality outside of us. There's a saying that sometimes is used, and that is that ontology will trump my own philosophy, my own ideas. And what that means is ontology is my actual being. Reality is going to come crashing in, and it is going to declare limits. And that leads to the second thing, which is our human nature limits us. Again, many thinkers had recognized what we were doing was actually trying to destroy the concept of human nature. Interestingly enough, in two of the most important dystopian novels of the 20th century, 1984 by George Orwell and Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, they envision the future very different. Orwell with a totalitarian regime that controlled through torture and fear and power. Huxley, a totalitarian regime that controlled through entertainment. But nonetheless, what was the central facet for both of them was that they denied there was a human nature. There is no human nature. Both Orwell and Huxley, when they had their nightmare and they looked into the future, they recognized that people were coming who were going to deny the essence of what it means to be human. And interestingly, Huxley and Orwell, neither one of them were Orthodox Christians. Neither one of them were touting this because of biblical terms, but they recognized the destruction of human nature. Not believing in human nature was going to end up leading to totalitarianism, because you would have to have an external force to control you if you can't control yourself. See, the reality is people are denying there is any such thing as human nature. That's what Justice Kennedy is saying. I get to define what that means for myself, but We were created as a particular type of being. There is a human nature, and that human nature includes both moral and physical aspects. Now, we've been in the process of really trying to get away from the moral ideas for many, many decades and actually bleeding back somewhat, even centuries now. We've been on this project to get rid of them. But ultimately, we're run into the cosmos, we run into physical limitations, and we don't want to have those. So we're now even denying those. Again, it doesn't matter that my entire body, every chromosome in my body has a Y chromosome, and every nucleic cell in my body has a Y chromosome. If I declare that I'm not male, then I am not male. And it does not matter what my body or what the cosmos says. We are at war with human nature and with any limits to our will. That's what's going on in our culture. But see, there is a human nature. There is a cosmos that's outside of me. That reality and those limits have been imposed upon me by my creator. I am a creature, not the creator, and therefore there are limits. And freedom is found not in rejecting those limits, but in embracing, submitting to, lining up with our true nature. Our nature limits us as to what is really true, beautiful, and good for me. I can try to declare that the false is true, but that won't change it. And that the ugly is beautiful, but that won't change it. That the evil and wicked is good, but that will not change it, because they're not submitted to my will, but to the will of God. They are not up to me to morph and change as I want. They are woven into the fabric of all reality. If you'd like to think about this more, I encourage you to take a look at that old series, The Freedom of Limits. You can find it on the website. Go to Teaching tab and look under series, and you'll see it right there. And you can take a deep dive in, either through the outlines or listening to the audio, to really dig into why this is essential for us to understand freedom. Because if we really care about our culture, along with prayer, we're going to have to sometimes have conversations that may be a little bit uncomfortable, but might have to say to people, I don't think that word means what you think it means. And to help us get back to understanding true freedom. Hope this is encouraging and helpful for you as you think through these things. I look forward to us gathering for worship again this Sunday. We're going to be starting a new series called Christ, Our Hope in Life and Death. I encourage you, invite a friend. Come early, grab a cup of coffee, spend some time in fellowship, and then let's worship our great God together. Have a great week. God bless.